I was never good with champagne glasses, too delicate for my cartographer's hands, which were more accustomed to the steadiness of drawing precise coastlines than balancing stemware at fancy events. So when I bumped into her at the Save Our Seas charity gala in Miami, the golden liquid went flying directly onto her emerald green dress. "Oh damn, I'm so sorry," I blurted, mortified as the champagne made a dramatic splash pattern across her expensive-looking outfit. Instead of the anger I expected, she laughed, a rich, vibrant sound that seemed to rise above the pretentious murmur of Miami's elite gathered in the ballroom. "Now I'll definitely stand out when I make my speech," she said, dabbing at the stain with a cocktail napkin. "I'm Gwendolyn Sanders." "Willow Morris," I replied, still flustered. "Let me help, I'm sure the restroom has paper towels or something." "Don't worry about it." Her eyes were the most startling blue I'd ever seen, contrasting dramatically with her fiery red hair. Occupational hazard. I've had far worse spilled on me in the Amazon. "The Amazon?" I asked, intrigued, despite my embarrassment. "I'm an explorer, environmental conservation specifically." Her smile was disarming. "And you?" "I make maps," I said, feeling suddenly inadequate. "I'm a cartographer." "Really?" Her eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That's fascinating. The world still needs good maps, especially of the places we're trying to save." Before I could respond, the event coordinator clinked a glass, announcing the next speaker, Gwendolyn herself. I watched in awe as she strode confidently to the podium, champagne stain and all, and delivered an impassioned speech about Miami's endangered coral reefs. She wasn't just talking about conservation, she was pledging $500,000 of her own expedition funds to preserve the local marine ecosystem. The room erupted in applause. I found myself clapping harder than anyone, moved by her generosity and conviction. After the speeches, I was preparing to slip away when I felt a touch on my elbow. "So, Willow the mapmaker, what brings you to a marine conservation gala?" Gwendolyn asked, appearing beside me with 2 fresh glasses of water. "I create specialized oceanographic charts," I explained, accepting the water gratefully. "The organization commissioned me for their educational materials." "Maps are stories," she said, with an intensity that caught me off guard. "They show what we value, what we choose to see." "Most people think they're just directions," I admitted. "People who think that way aren't looking closely enough," she replied, her gaze holding mine a beat too long. The conversation flowed effortlessly after that. We discovered mutual passions for environmental preservation, though we approached it differently, her through direct exploration and advocacy, me through the precision of cartographic documentation. As the evening wound down, Gwendolyn reached into a small clutch purse and handed me her business card. "I'm planning another expedition soon," she said. "I could use someone who knows how to chart unknown territories." Our fingers brushed as I took the card, and I felt an unexpected jolt of connection. Her card was textured, expensive, with gold lettering that caught the light. "Gwendolyn Sanders, Environmental Explorer." "Here's mine," I said, offering my much simpler card in return. "Though I doubt you'll need custom maps anytime soon." "Don't be so sure," she replied with a smile that suggested she saw something in me that perhaps I didn't see myself. "The right map can change everything, Willow Morris." As she walked away, I noticed her champagne-stained dress under the ballroom lights. Somehow, she'd made even that look intentional, beautiful even. I tucked her card into my purse, already knowing I would call her, already sensing that my carefully ordered world was about to change course entirely. 3 weeks after the gala, I found myself hunched over my drafting table, creating the most detailed custom maps of my career. Gwendolyn had called just days after our meeting, speaking rapidly about an upcoming Amazon expedition that needed precise cartography. Now my usually tidy studio apartment was covered with reference materials and half-finished renderings. "This tributary doesn't match your previous notes," I said, tapping my pencil against a particularly challenging section as Gwendolyn leaned over my shoulder. Her perfume, something earthy with hints of jasmine, was distracting in the close quarters of my workspace. "The rainy season changes it," she explained, her breath warm against my ear. "That's why we need these maps to be adaptable. The landscape there is never static." It was our 5th late-night mapping session this week. What had started as a straightforward professional collaboration had evolved into something I couldn't quite define. Gwendolyn Sanders was unlike anyone I'd ever worked with, passionate, occasionally frustrating and completely magnetic. You see here? She leaned closer, her red hair brushing against my cheek as she pointed to a remote area. Traditional maps show nothing, but there's an entire community living sustainably there. I want them represented properly. That matters to you, I observed. Not a question but a realization. Everything matters, she said simply. The things we choose to make visible shape how others see the world. I nodded, understanding completely. It was what had drawn me to cartography, the power to capture reality while simultaneously interpreting it. Working with Gwendolyn reminded me of that purpose, something I'd nearly forgotten amid corporate commissions. We worked silently for a while, the only sounds the scratch of my technical pens and the soft jazz playing from my old stereo. Around midnight, I reached for a ruler at the same moment she did. Our hands collided, then lingered. Her fingers were warm against mine, slightly calloused from her outdoor adventures. Sorry, I mumbled, pulling back as though burned. But Gwendolyn didn't move her hand. Instead, she looked at me with unexpected vulnerability in those brilliant blue eyes. Willow, she said softly. I think there's more happening here than map-making. My heart hammered against my ribs. What do you mean? Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward slowly, deliberately, giving me every chance to back away. I didn't. Her lips met mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with unexplored hunger. My hands found their way to her hair, as red and wild as her spirit. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the mat between us was slightly crumpled. I smoothed it automatically, professional instincts kicking in despite my racing pulse. I've wanted to do that since you spilled champagne on me, she admitted with a small laugh. I've never kissed a client before, I replied, still dazed. Is that a problem? Her expression grew serious. I considered for only a moment. No, but this expedition of yours. These maps aren't exactly simple professional courtesy, are they? Gwendolyn took a deep breath. Willow, I want you to come with me to the Amazon, not just as my cartographer but as, whatever this is becoming. The proposition hung in the air between us, weighty and unexpected. My life was ordered, predictable, maps with clear boundaries. Gwendolyn represented the opposite, the unknown territories, the places where conventional charts failed. I don't do field work, I protested weakly. I'm a studio cartographer. I work from data, reports, satellite imagery. Maybe it's time to experience firsthand what you've only drawn from a distance, she challenged. Her hand found mine again, more deliberate this time. Some things can't be understood from secondary sources. Looking at our joined hands, I felt boundaries shifting, personal and professional. The expedition would mean leaving my comfort zone entirely. Yet the thought of seeing those rivers and forests with my own eyes, alongside this extraordinary woman, made my carefully constructed resistance crumble. When would we leave? I asked finally. Gwendolyn's smile was radiant, triumphant. 2 weeks, just enough time to finish these maps and prepare. As she kissed me again, I realized I'd just agreed to redraw the map of my own life, with no guarantee where the new lines might lead us. The Amazon was nothing like the maps I'd meticulously created. No amount of topographic precision could capture the overwhelming sensory experience. The symphony of insects, the oppressive humidity that made my blonde hair stick to my neck, the infinite shades of green that no Pantone system could properly categorize. 2 weeks into the expedition, I was finally finding my rhythm. Gwendolyn moved through the jungle with practiced ease, while I documented our journey with field notes and quick sketches that would become proper maps once we returned to civilization. You're getting good at this, Gwendolyn observed as I balanced on a fallen log, calibrating our position with a GPS unit. For someone who claimed to be strictly a studio cartographer. I smiled, secretly proud of my adaptation. Turns out fieldwork has its advantages. Such as? She raised an eyebrow playfully. The company, I replied, feeling bolder in this place so far from my ordered Miami life. We made camp near a tributary we'd been mapping, our small team of local guides setting up a perimeter while Gwendolyn and I organized our documentation from the day. The research was going well. We'd identified 3 previously unmapped watersheds that were critical to local communities but overlooked in government conservation efforts. That evening, dark clouds gathered with alarming speed. Storm's coming, our lead guide Manuel announced, concern evident in his voice. Big one. We need shelter beyond these tents. Within 20 minutes, rain began hammering down with violent intensity. Lightning cracked across the sky as we hastily packed essential equipment. There's an old research cabin about half a kilometer north, Gwendolyn shouted over the deluge. Manuel and the team know another shelter east. We'll rendezvous tomorrow. Before I could process the plan, Gwendolyn grabbed my hand and we were running through the jungle, rain stinging our faces. I clutched my waterproof case of maps against my chest, heart pounding with each crack of thunder. The cabin appeared suddenly, a small weathered structure nearly swallowed by vegetation. Gwendolyn shouldered the door open and pulled me inside, just as lightning struck terrifyingly close, illuminating her rain-slicked face for a dramatic instant. "Are you okay?" She pushed wet hair from my face, her explorer's confidence momentarily replaced by genuine concern. "I'm fine," I gasped, dripping onto the wooden planks. "The maps are safe." She laughed, the sound unexpectedly tender. "I wasn't worried about the maps, Willow." The cabin was basic but solid. A table, 2 chairs, a small wood stove, and a narrow cot. Gwendolyn found candles and matches in a metal box while I changed into dry clothes from my pack. In the soft candlelight, with rain drumming relentlessly outside, the tiny cabin became an intimate universe of two. We sat close together for warmth, sharing the remains of our ration bars. "I've never seen you scared before," Gwendolyn said quietly. "I wasn't scared," I protested automatically. "Liar." She smiled. "It's okay. Even experienced explorers get scared. That's how we stay alive." "Is that why you do this? For the danger?" Her expression grew thoughtful. "I do this because the world is disappearing faster than we can map it. Places, cultures, ecosystems, vanishing while politicians debate whether they're worth saving." In that moment, I saw past her adventurer persona to something more complex, a woman fighting desperately to preserve what others deemed expendable. "What about you?" she asked. "Why maps?" "They make sense of chaos," I admitted. "They give boundaries to the boundless." "And is that what you want? Boundaries?" Her voice dropped lower as she moved closer. "I used to think so." Our eyes locked, and suddenly the small space between us vanished. Her kiss was different here, urgent, almost desperate, as wild as our surroundings. I responded with equal fervor, months of precision and control dissolving as we fumbled with remaining clothing. On that narrow cot, with rain and darkness enclosing us, Gwendolyn mapped my body with explorer's hands, discovering, claiming, memorizing. I traced the constellation of freckles across her shoulders, the scar on her hip from an expedition gone wrong. Our breathing synchronized like currents merging, building to a crescendo that left us trembling and transformed. Afterward, tangled together in the humid dark, she whispered stories against my skin, adventures in distant places, close calls, moments of discovery. I shared fewer tales but deeper fears, things I'd never told anyone about my carefully constructed life and the wildness I'd always suppressed. Morning broke with startling clarity, the storm having scrubbed the air clean. As we prepared to rendezvous with our team, a strange awkwardness descended. Back in Miami, we'd been building something: momentum, connection, possibility. Here, having crossed that final boundary, we suddenly seemed unsure of our footing. "We should get moving," Gwendolyn said briskly, her explorer persona firmly back in place. "The team will be waiting." I nodded, rolling my maps carefully, wondering if what happened in the storm-bound cabin would remain there, separate from whatever awaited us back in civilization. As we stepped outside into the dripping jungle, I felt the first stirrings of a fear greater than any tropical storm. That having finally found unmapped territory worth exploring, I might not be allowed to chart its full dimensions. 2 months after returning from the Amazon, Miami felt both familiar and foreign. My studio apartment, once my sanctuary, now seemed confining. The maps I'd created from our expedition data hung on my walls like fragments of a vivid dream I couldn't quite recapture. Gwendolyn and I had barely spoken since our return. The intimacy we'd shared in that storm-lashed cabin had evaporated under the harsh fluorescent lights of the research center where we'd processed our findings. She'd been consumed with conservation reports, media appearances, and funding meetings. I'd retreated to my maps, telling myself this was how things were meant to be. Tonight, I was looking for inspiration in unlikely places. My current project, a series of abstract cartographic art pieces for a gallery exhibition, had stalled. Which is why I found myself slipping into the back row of the Painted Queen, Miami's most renowned drag venue. Maps are about transformation, the translation of three-dimensional reality into two-dimensional representation. Drag seemed a parallel art form, the transformation of identity into performance. I hoped watching these artists might spark something new in my work. The show was spectacular. Colors, movement, music, and raw emotion, colliding in ways that made my cartographer's brain whir with possibilities. I sketched frantically in my notebook, imagining new ways to represent emotional topographies through color and form. And now, welcoming our special guest judge, the woman who puts the wild in wilderness, just back from saving the Amazon, Gwendolyn Sanders. My pencil froze mid-stroke. There she was, striding onto the stage in a stunning emerald dress reminiscent of the one I'd spilled champagne on months ago. The crowd erupted in applause as she waved, confident and radiant under the spotlight. What was she doing here? Nothing in our weeks together had suggested any connection to drag culture. Yet she moved through this space with comfortable familiarity, exchanging inside jokes with the performers as she took her seat at the judges' table. I shrank lower in my seat, irrationally afraid she might spot me. For the remainder of the show, I couldn't focus on my research. Instead, I watched Gwendolyn, how animated she became while evaluating performances, her genuine respect for the artists, her easy laughter. When the show ended, I debated slipping out unnoticed, but some magnetic pull kept me in place until the venue had nearly emptied. Finally, gathering my courage, I approached the stage where Gwendolyn was chatting with the evening's winner. Interesting choice of research location. Her voice came from behind me before I could reach her. I turned to find her standing there, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. I could say the same about your choice of evening activities, I replied, trying to sound casual despite my pounding heart. I've been judging here monthly for years. Performance art is my other passion. She studied me with unnerving intensity. But you never asked about my life outside of exploration, did you? The accusation stung because it was true. You never asked about mine either. Fair point. Her expression softened slightly. So why are you here, Willow? I explained my art project, showing her the sketches I'd been making. To my surprise, she listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about my approach. You should come backstage, she finally said. Meet some of the performers. Their perspectives on transformation might help your project. The backstage area was a chaotic wonderland of costumes, wigs, and makeup. Gwendolyn introduced me to several queens who generously shared their artistic philosophies. I was so engrossed that I barely noticed when Gwendolyn pulled me into a quiet corner. Why didn't you call me after we got back? She asked directly. You seemed busy with your real life, I answered. The expedition was. I thought maybe it was just something that happened in the moment. The expedition was work. What happened between us wasn't. Then why did you shut down afterward? Her confident facade cracked slightly. Because I don't know how to do this, Willow. Maps and wilderness I understand, but this, she gestured between us, terrifies me. Gwendolyn Sanders, afraid? I couldn't help the small smile that formed. I thought you thrived on adventure. Some uncharted territories are more frightening than others. Before I could respond, one of the queens called for Gwendolyn's opinion on a costume piece. Our moment of honesty hung suspended between us, unresolved. As the night progressed, tension built with every glance, every accidental touch. Finally, as the venue was closing, it erupted. You can't just map people like your precious rivers, Willow, she said sharply, when I mentioned documenting our Amazon findings. Some things resist being captured and contained. And you can't treat people like expeditions, intense experiences you leave behind when you move on to the next adventure. I shot back. We stood facing each other in the empty hallway, both breathing hard. Then suddenly her hands were in my hair and her mouth was on mine, kissing me with an intensity that made the Amazon storm seem tame by comparison. When we broke apart, she pressed her forehead to mine. I've missed you, she whispered, the simple truth more powerful than any elaborate declaration. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. As we walked out into the humid Miami night, I realized we were both stepping into territory neither of us had fully mapped, a place where expedition notes and careful cartography could only take us so far. My studio transformed over the following weeks. What began as conventional cartography evolved into something wildly different, maps that charted emotional territories instead of physical ones. Inspired by the drag performances, I created abstract representations of human connection, desire, and identity using traditional cartographic techniques in unconventional ways. "This is extraordinary," Gwendolyn said, examining my latest piece, a map of our Amazon journey that represented emotional landmarks rather than geographical ones. The storm night in the cabin was rendered as a swirling vortex of crimson and gold. "It's still experimental," I admitted, watching her face carefully. We'd been cautiously rebuilding whatever existed between us, spending evenings together discussing art, conservation, and gradually more personal matters. "The art world will devour this," she insisted, tracing the contours with a fingertip. "It's like you've found a way to chart the unchartable." "That's what drag taught me," I explained. "Performance can reveal truth that literal representation can't capture." Gwendolyn smiled, pulling me into a quick kiss that still made my heart race. We were interrupted by her phone buzzing insistently. "Sorry," she muttered, checking the message. Her expression darkened instantly. "Damn it. What's wrong?" "Anna," she said, the name falling like a stone between us. "Who's Anna?" I asked, feeling a sudden chill. "My ex-partner." Gwendolyn sighed heavily. "She's threatening to pull funding from the conservation project." I waited as she made a tense call, catching fragments about grant applications and donor relationships. When she finally hung up, the carefree explorer had vanished, replaced by someone carrying invisible weights. "Anna Anderson. We were together for 3 years, she explained afterward, staring out my studio window. "She's on the board of the Environmental Conservation Alliance, the main funder of my expeditions. And now she's using that position against you?" "She claims there are concerns about my research methodology." Gwendolyn's laugh was bitter. "Really, she's just furious that I've moved on." The revelation of Anna cast everything in a new light. Gwendolyn's hesitation after the Amazon, her fear of commitment, it made more sense now. Professional and personal had intertwined disastrously before. "What will you do?" I asked. "Fight like hell," she answered grimly. "But it means I'll be buried in grant reapplications and donor meetings for weeks." Those weeks proved challenging. Gwendolyn became embroiled in bureaucratic warfare, while I threw myself into my art. When we did see each other, we avoided discussing Anna, instead creating a bubble where only our work and growing feelings existed. One evening, exhausted from battling funding committees, Gwendolyn arrived at my studio looking defeated. "Anna's winning," she confessed as I held her. "She's convinced 2 major donors to review their commitments." "That's not fair," I protested. "Your research is impeccable." "This isn't about research, it's about power." She pulled away, pacing my small space. I was stupid to think personal and professional could remain separate. I felt a sting at her words, wondering where that left us. Before I could ask, my phone chimed with an incoming email. "The gallery accepted my exhibition proposal," I announced after reading it. "They want to showcase the map series, the drag-inspired cartography." Gwendolyn's face transformed instantly. "Willow, that's amazing!" She swept me into a hug. "When?" "Next month." Opening night coincides with Art Basel. As we celebrated, the weight of her funding battles temporarily lifted. For hours we lost ourselves in planning my exhibition, her expertise in presentation proving invaluable. When she finally dozed off on my sofa, I covered her with a blanket, struck by how peaceful she looked away from Anna's machinations. In the following weeks, our creative collaboration became a sanctuary from external pressures. While Gwendolyn fought to preserve her professional reputation, I prepared my first major art exhibition. We worked side by side in my studio, her conservation reports spread across one table, my maps across another. "We make a good team," she observed one night, watching me apply final touches to a piece that represented gender as a navigable terrain rather than fixed location. "We navigate each other's worlds," I replied, setting down my brush. "Speaking of which," she hesitated, uncharacteristically nervous. "I've been offered a 6-month expedition, Antarctica, leading a climate research team." The news hit me like a physical blow. "When would you leave?" 3 weeks after your exhibition opens. Antarctica. Literally the opposite end of the Earth. Just when we'd found our rhythm, geography threatened to separate us again. It's an incredible opportunity, I said carefully, fighting disappointment. It is, she agreed, watching me closely. But for the first time in my life, an expedition isn't an automatic yes. That admission, so simple yet profound from a woman who lived for exploration, made something bloom in my chest. As she pulled me into her arms, I realized we were both creating new maps together, charting the delicate territory between independence and connection, adventure and home. I can't believe I let you talk me into this, I hissed, peering nervously from behind the curtain at the crowded club. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might interfere with the microphone taped to my chest. You said you needed deeper research for your exhibition, Gwendolyn reminded me, adjusting the elaborate wig she'd helped secure to my head. Nothing reveals transformation like experiencing it firsthand. When I'd mentioned wanting to understand drag performance more intimately for my cartographic art, I never expected to end up backstage at amateur night, trembling in 4-inch heels and a costume that left little to the imagination. I'm a map maker, not a performer, I protested weakly. Tonight you're Willow Wanderlust, Gwendolyn replied with a grin, stepping back to assess her handiwork. And you look incredible. The transformation had taken hours, contouring, highlighting, padding, tucking, all under Gwendolyn's surprisingly expert guidance. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The blonde woman with precise movements and careful words had disappeared, replaced by a glittering creature of color and confidence. 5 minutes, amateurs, called the stage manager. I can't do this, I whispered, panic rising. Gwendolyn took my face in her hands, careful not to smudge the makeup she'd applied. Yes, you can. Remember what you told me about your maps? How they reveal hidden truths? This is no different. It's completely different. Maps don't have stage fright. She laughed softly, then leaned forward to kiss me gently, mindful of our lipstick. Find me in the audience. Perform just for me. The simple instruction became my anchor. When Willow Wanderlust was announced and I stumbled onto the stage in 2 high heels, I froze momentarily under the blinding lights. Then I spotted Gwendolyn in the front row, her encouraging smile a beacon. I launched into my routine, a carefully choreographed number about exploration and discovery that had seemed clever during rehearsals, but now felt terrifyingly exposed. Yet something magical happened midway through. As I moved to the music, I found myself inhabiting this created persona, understanding viscerally what my maps had been trying to express, how transformation isn't about becoming someone else, but revealing hidden facets of yourself. When my performance ended, the applause washed over me like a wave. I hadn't won, not even close, but the experience itself was victory enough. Backstage, Gwendolyn found me removing the elaborate costume pieces. You were magnificent, she said, eyes shining with pride. I was adequate, I corrected, but couldn't stop smiling. But I understand now. What I've been trying to map, it's not just identity, but the courage to claim space for yourself. Helping me out of the complicated outfit, Gwendolyn's hands lingered on my shoulders. Speaking of claiming space, her voice dropped lower. You've awakened something with that performance. The small dressing room suddenly felt electric. Most of the other competitors had cleared out, heading to the main club to celebrate. We were effectively alone. Have I? I asked, finding confidence in the remnants of Willow Wanderlust still clinging to me. Her answer came physically, pressing me against the dressing room wall, her mouth hungry against mine. We'd been intimate before, but this was different, urgent, almost desperate, as if my performance had unlocked something primal between us. Someone might come in, I gasped, as her hands slid beneath the thin robe I'd donned. Let them, she murmured against my neck. I need you now. We came together in that tiny dressing room, surrounded by discarded sequins and feathers, the bass from the club vibrating through the walls. Gwendolyn mapped my body with expert precision, while remnants of stage makeup smudged between us, creating an abstract artwork of our passion. After, as we tried to make ourselves presentable, she looked at me with unexpected seriousness. I've decided about Antarctica, she said quietly. My heart stuttered. I'd been avoiding the subject, dreading the inevitable separation. And? I'm declining the expedition leadership. What? Gwendolyn, you can't. I'm not declining the project, she clarified. I'm recommending a CO leadership model. I'll do 3 months, then return for your next exhibition while my colleague leads the second phase. I stared at her, understanding the magnitude of this compromise from a woman who had never divided her attention between professional passion and personal life. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded slowly. I want to explore this us as thoroughly as any uncharted territory. That means being present, not continents apart. As we left the club together, traces of glitter still clinging to our skin, I realized how profoundly we'd both transformed since that first champagne spill. Gwendolyn was learning to anchor herself without losing her spirit of adventure. And I was learning that some boundaries exist to be crossed, some territories deserve exploration beyond the safety of paper maps. Next time, Gwendolyn said with a mischievous smile as we hailed a taxi, I think I should be the one in drag. On opening night of my exhibition, Cartographies of Identity, the gallery buzzed with Miami's art elite. My maps, vibrant explorations of gender, sexuality, and transformation inspired by drag culture, covered the walls in a riot of color and form that contrasted sharply with my earlier precision work. You've created something revolutionary, the gallery owner whispered, as we watched attendees cluster around a particularly bold piece that reimagined sexual identity as archipelagos rather than continents. I've already had 3 serious inquiries about purchases. I nodded, too nervous to fully absorb his praise. My eyes kept darting to the entrance, watching for Gwendolyn. She'd texted earlier saying she was running late, something about a last-minute meeting with potential donors for her restructured Antarctic project. The crowd shifted, and suddenly there she was, stunning in a tailored suit that echoed the blues and greens of my artwork. Our eyes met across the gallery, her proud smile warming me more than the critical acclaim ever could. Before she could reach me, however, a familiar figure intercepted her. Even from a distance, I recognized Anna Anderson from photos I'd researched online. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. Whatever she said made Gwendolyn's expression harden instantly. I excused myself from the gallery owner and moved toward them, catching the tail end of their conversation. Irresponsible research methodologies are just the beginning, Anna was saying, her voice professionally pleasant despite the venom in her words. The board should know about the indigenous relocation your last project caused. Gwendolyn's face had gone pale. That's a damn lie and you know it. My team documented the illegal logging operation that was the actual cause. Your documentation methods were questionable at best, Anna cut in smoothly, just like your judgment in personal matters. Her gaze flicked meaningfully toward me as I approached. Is everything all right? I asked, sliding my hand into Gwendolyn's. Perfectly fine, Anna replied with a razor smile. Just catching up with an old colleague. You must be the cartographer. Fascinating little drawings you've made. The dismissive tone made my spine stiffen. They're actually mixed media cartographic interpretations examining the artificial boundaries of gender expression and identity, I stated, channeling some of Willow Wanderlust's confidence. Anna raised an eyebrow. How progressive. Though I wonder if the Environmental Conservation Alliance Board will feel the same way about funding research from someone so artistically involved in such controversial subject matter. The threat was thinly veiled. I felt Gwendolyn tense beside me. My personal relationship and Willow's art have nothing to do with the scientific validity of my research, Gwendolyn replied evenly. Don't they? Anna glanced around the gallery meaningfully. Public perception matters in conservation funding. These provocative pieces could easily become a liability for our organization's image. Before either of us could respond, she pressed a business card into my hand. When you're ready for more traditional work, dear, do call. I've always appreciated skilled cartography. With that parting shot, she glided away into the crowd. I'm so sorry, Gwendolyn whispered once Anna was out of earshot. I never wanted my professional battles to touch your night. I squeezed her hand. What was that about indigenous relocation? Gwendolyn's expression darkened. Absolute fabrication. My team documented illegal operations that were forcing communities out. Anna's twisting it to suggest our research methods somehow contributed to the problem. She ran a hand through her hair in frustration. She's getting desperate, pulling anything she can to discredit me. As we rejoined the exhibition crowd, I noticed several people giving us curious looks. Anna's network of influence already at work. Despite the successful evening, 3 pieces sold, and a glowing review from Miami's most notorious art critic. An undercurrent of tension remained. Later that night, back at my apartment, Gwendolyn paced restlessly while I removed the last of my exhibition makeup. "She's going to use your art against my research," she said finally. "Conservative board members will question funding someone whose partner creates controversial work." "Can she really do that?" I asked. "Anna specializes in character assassination disguised as professional concern." Gwendolyn sank onto my sofa. "And the Antarctica project is particularly vulnerable since we're still securing the final funding portions." I sat beside her, suddenly understanding the full weight of our relationship's potential professional cost. "What do you want to do?" She looked at me with pained eyes. "I won't ask you to compromise your artistic vision. That exhibition tonight was brilliant, the most honest cartography I've ever seen. And I won't ask you to compromise your research," I replied. "Your work is too important." We sat in silence, the impasse hanging between us. Finally, Gwendolyn took my hand. "Perhaps there's another way to map this problem," she said thoughtfully. "Instead of retreating from either front, we go bold. Make our connection a strength, not a vulnerability." "What do you mean?" "A joint project. Your cartographic artistry documenting climate impact. Scientific integrity with artistic vision." The idea bloomed between us. A collaboration that would make our personal connection professionally undeniable rather than something to hide. As we sketched possibilities late into the night, I realized we were charting new territory together. A landscape where personal and professional didn't have to remain separate continents. With Anna's threats hanging over us and the Antarctica expedition approaching, the path forward wasn't clear. But for the first time, we were attempting to navigate it as equal partners, combining our different ways of seeing the world into something neither of us could create alone. The solution came to me at 3 a.m., surrounded by crumpled sketches and half-drunk coffee mugs. For weeks since my exhibition, I'd been developing a new cartographic system, one that merged scientific data visualization with evocative artistic representation. "Gwendolyn," I called, shaking her awake where she'd fallen asleep on my studio couch. "I've got it." She blinked blearily at the prototype map I thrust before her, Antarctica rendered through a revolutionary technique that layered precise scientific measurements with emotional resonance. Ice core samples became textured topography. Temperature changes manifested as color gradients that immediately conveyed urgency without sacrificing accuracy. "This is." She sat up, suddenly wide awake. "Willow, this is brilliant." "It's a new language," I explained excitedly. "One that bridges science and emotion, data visualization that makes people feel while they learn." Over the next days, we refined the system together. Gwendolyn provided rigorous scientific parameters, while I developed visual translations that remained faithful to the data while provoking emotional connection. We called it resonant cartography, a methodology that could revolutionize how environmental research communicated with the public. When we presented it to the Environmental Conservation Alliance Board, strategically bypassing Anna, the response was immediate. The scientific members appreciated its accuracy. The marketing team saw its public engagement potential. Within 2 weeks, Gwendolyn's Antarctica expedition was not only fully funded, but expanded to include my participation as cartographic innovation specialist. "We did it," Gwendolyn whispered as we left the board meeting, her hand finding mine once we were safely in the elevator. Anna's attempted sabotage had backfired spectacularly. By forcing us to innovate, she'd inadvertently helped create something groundbreaking. We heard through the grapevine that she'd been quietly reassigned to the organization's Midwest office, a professional exile from the environmental power circles she'd dominated. As the Antarctica departure approached, we worked feverishly to prepare. My gallery exhibition had traveled to New York and San Francisco, generating critical acclaim that strengthened our professional position. Meanwhile, our personal relationship deepened into something neither of us had experienced before. A partnership of equals where independence and intimacy coexisted without contradiction. 3 days before departure, I was packing specialized equipment when Gwendolyn burst into the studio, her expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Change of plans." She thrust a folder into my hands. Inside was a completely revised expedition schedule, with our departure delayed by 2 weeks. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the documents. National Geographic wants to feature our methodology. They're sending a crew to document the expedition preparations here in Miami before we leave. The implications hit me. Major media attention would cement both our professional breakthrough and our relationship in the public eye. No more hiding. No more separation of worlds. Are you okay with this level of visibility? I asked carefully. Us together, professionally and personally? Gwendolyn took a deep breath. 6 months ago? No. Now? Absolutely yes. The night before the National Geographic team arrived, we celebrated at the airport observation deck, watching planes take off into the velvet sky. I never thought I'd find someone who understands both my worlds, Gwendolyn said softly. The explorer and the performer. And I never thought I'd leave my studio for Antarctica, I replied with a smile. The conversation drifted to logistics, until Gwendolyn suddenly fell silent, staring at the departing flights with unusual intensity. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing's wrong. She turned to me, expression serious. Willow, I need to ask you something. My heart stuttered as she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a silver compass pendant, beautifully engraved. This isn't a proposal, not yet, she clarified quickly. But it is a promise. Wherever we explore, we find our way back to each other. Tears blurred my vision as she fastened the necklace around my throat. Words failed me completely, so I kissed her instead, pouring everything I couldn't articulate into the contact. As we broke apart, an announcement echoed through the terminal, final boarding call for a flight to London. That was almost us, Gwendolyn said softly, nodding toward the gate. Met at a gala, separate lives, occasional professional intersection. Instead? I prompted. Instead, I'm asking you to come with me. Not just to Antarctica, but everywhere. As my partner, my collaborator, my compass point. The moment stretched between us, weighted with possibility. The old Willow might have hesitated, might have calculated risks and rewards. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Yes, I said simply, to all of it. In her brilliant smile, I saw our future mapping itself before us, territories we would chart together, each bringing our unique vision to the journey. 1 year passed like a compass spinning wildly before finding true north. Antarctica had transformed us both, Gwendolyn becoming more grounded, me more adventurous. The expedition had succeeded beyond our expectations, with resonant cartography now being adopted by conservation organizations worldwide. Miami's Vizcaya Gardens glowed with fairy lights as we prepared for the opening of our joint exhibition, Charted Waters, where science meets art. The same ballroom where we'd first met, when I'd spilled champagne on an explorer who would change my life, now displayed our collaborative work on climate change visualization. Full circle, Gwendolyn whispered, adjusting the compass pendant that rarely left my neck. She looked stunning in a tailored suit nearly identical to the one she'd worn to my first exhibition, though the woman inside it had evolved considerably. From spilled champagne to saving ecosystems, I agreed, smoothing my emerald dress, a deliberate echo of the one she'd worn that first night. Think anyone will notice the symmetry? I doubt it. She smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that still made my heart skip. But I like that we know. The exhibition space transformed as guests arrived, environmental activists mingling with art patrons, scientists debating with gallery owners. Our worlds, once separate, now overlapped seamlessly. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a massive installation mapping climate change impact across 7 continents, rendered through our pioneering technique that made scientific data emotionally resonant. Midway through the evening, Gwendolyn clinked a glass for attention. The room quieted as she took my hand and led me to the center of the ballroom. 1 year ago, resonant cartography was just an idea born of necessity, she began. Today it's changing how we communicate environmental urgency. But that's not the only transformation worth celebrating. She gestured around the room. Tonight, Willow and I are announcing the Morris Sanders Scholarship Foundation for Young Women in STEM and Arts Integration. Using proceeds from our exhibition and expedition documentation, we'll fund 10 scholarships annually for students bridging scientific research and artistic communication. Applause erupted as details appeared on the display screens. The foundation would operate precisely where we'd found our greatest strength, at the intersection of rigorous data and emotional storytelling. Later, as the crowd thinned, we slipped away to the garden terrace where fairy lights reflected in the pool like stars. Miami's humidity wrapped around us like a familiar embrace after months in Antarctic chill. "Ready for the next expedition?" Gwendolyn asked, producing her tablet to show me the proposed route through Southeast Asian mangrove forests, our third collaborative project since Antarctica. I studied the preliminary maps, already mentally translating scientific concerns into visual language that would make people care about ecosystems they'd never seen. I've been thinking about our approach. What if we incorporate local artistic traditions into the cartography for each region? Her eyes lit with excitement. Cultural resonance alongside environmental data. That's brilliant, Willow. As we discussed possibilities, I marveled at how naturally we'd found our rhythm, her exploring while I mapped, each expedition becoming more balanced between scientific discovery and artistic innovation. The boundaries between our professional roles had blurred into perfect complementary strength. "Remember when you hired me to make just maps for your Amazon expedition?" I asked, smiling at the memory. "Best professional mistake I ever made," she replied, pulling me close. Though I maintain spilling champagne on me was a deliberate strategy to get my attention. "Purely accidental," I protested, laughing. "Though I admit you were captivating even covered in Dom Perignon." The garden around us was quiet now, guests departed, staff discreetly cleaning inside. Above us, despite Miami's light pollution, a few stubborn stars pushed through the sky's darkness, celestial navigation points that had guided explorers for centuries before GPS and satellite imagery. "I've been thinking," Gwendolyn said softly, her expression growing serious, "about our next personal expedition." My breath caught as she reached into her pocket, producing not another compass, but a simple platinum ring. Unlike her impromptu airport gesture a year earlier, this moment carried unmistakable intention. "Willow Morris," she said, voice steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. "Will you navigate the rest of our lives together? As partners, collaborators, and wives?" The word hung between us, wives, carrying weight and promise and possibility. In that moment, every map I'd ever created seemed incomplete compared to the territories we might explore together. "Yes," I whispered, feeling tears threaten as she slid the ring onto my finger. "Every expedition, every discovery, every uncharted territory." As we kissed beneath Miami stars, I thought about transformation, how a spilled drink had led to Amazon adventures, how professional collaboration had blossomed into profound partnership, how two women with different ways of seeing the world had created a new language together. Some journeys can be meticulously planned, with precise coordinates and careful provisions. Others happen by beautiful accident, when you least expect them. The best maps, I've learned, leave room for both.